All right, let's do this. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the November 2024 community meeting for OpenFGA. Um, if you've been part of one of our previous calls, you know the structure. We'll start with some introductions if you want to. If you don't want to, that's fine as well. Then we'll go over the things that have just been shipped in the last month, a demo or some demos. We'll talk about our current and future work before we move on to some community news. And at the end, if we still have time left, there's always some room for Q&A. But if you have any questions for the OpenFGA team, there's a bunch of them in this call. Don't wait until the end. Feel free to raise your hand or drop something in the Slack, and we'll try to answer whenever we get a chance. So, very happy to see you all on this call. Let's get started with introductions. Um, but first, let's meet the OpenFGA team. There's a lot of faces on this slide, a lot of people that are working hard to make OpenFGA the project that it is today. So as always, thank you very much, everybody that's involved with OpenFGA. It means a lot that a lot of people are working on OpenFGA. But intros, I'll be a good host and introduce myself. And then if anybody in this call is new, or even if you're not new, but you want to introduce yourself as well, feel free to unmute yourself and introduce yourself. So, hey, everybody, my name is Sam Bellen. I'm based in Belgium. I'm part of Okta, and I focus on OpenFGA and OctaFGA. I'm interested in it because it's my job. No, that's not true. I think it's a very exciting new product, a new approach or newish approach to authorization. And as like we like to say, authorization is where authentication was 10 years ago, which means it's still a lot of opportunity to make a really cool authorization product. And I think OpenFGA is definitely one of the cooler things out there. So where am I at OpenFGA adoption journey? I've been playing around with it for quite some time now, so I think I've got the hang of most of it, but I keep on learning new things on a weekly basis, let's say. So there's still a lot to learn from me as well. If there's anybody else that likes to introduce themselves, now is the time. Feel free to unmute yourself. And if you don't want to, the chat is also available for introductions.
Hi, I'm Jace. I'm with Zapier. We use FGA, not OpenFGA, but a lot of the tooling is also OpenFGA, like the SDK, CLI, same modeling. And so enjoy joining these calls to see what's coming to those tooling and hear how other people are using it.
Hey,
Thanks.
Chase, welcome.
Yeah, I can go next. I'm Sebastian from Zeiss. And we're also like on a journey with OpenFGA and FGA itself. For us, it started a lot with the open source projects that we are running, and we were looking for a solution that would do what you said, like differentiate between authentication or authorization, that we don't have to bring our authorization all the time with us, so that we can have a shared model and a shared language and modeling method for all of the projects that we run. And we thought it was a good fit. And for example, with the things that we saw with Backstage, it seemed to be really good also for other developer productivity tooling. So happy to see what's coming next.
Welcome, Sebastian, as well. And I'm looking forward to see what you're going to demo later because, spoiler alert, Sebastian is going to do a demo or multiple demos, maybe even. We'll see. But before we get to the demos, let's quickly go over what has just been shipped in the last month. We've shipped two versions of OpenFGA, 1.7.0 and 1.8.0. And in the first one, we've added an experimental access control feature. We've showed it in our previous call, but it basically is FGA for FGA, meaning that you have more fine-grained control over access to your APIs, your OpenFGA APIs, that is. And in 1.8.0, we've added a batch check API endpoint. This is currently only implemented on the API side. The SDKs are still a work in progress. That's coming hopefully real soon. We're working on it, but it is available on the API side already. And with the batch check, you can basically just like it says, batch a lot of checks into one API call, reducing some overhead and reducing some latency. And we've also added support for contextual tuples in the expand API. So if you use the expand API, that's definitely something that you might want to check out. And lastly, we're always working on performance updates. 1.7.0 had one or a few. 1.8 also had a few, and I think we're going to continue to focus on performance updates for the foreseeable future. So that's always nice to hear. So I already teased this, I already spoiled a little bit, but Sebastian is here in this call to listen, to learn, but also to show us what he's been working on with Zeiss. So it's your time to shine now.
Let's see for that. Yes, before I start like the demo, actually, let me share something. Not a big fan always of slides, but I think in this case it makes sense because I think I wanted to describe where we are heading and why we are heading there. So because like as a big enterprise, it's not always easy to change from one type of authorization. We have the usual enter ID with big roles, big groups, and so on and so forth, to something that's more fine-grained, more separated from the big enterprisey directory. And we thought that like with open source, it was the first good way of introducing this, because we have the problem, we have so many applications, we have this role explosion, right? Every new application has a new role, which means a new group, which means like you have to transport a lot of things that you actually are only relationship between the application and the user. And that's why we were looking into that. Also from an angle of we're doing a lot of Gen AI stuff very recently, and there with these rack architecture, it's becoming a pain in the ass, I would say, to be honest, to manage all of these access credentials or accesses to data. And then there's also one thing in our journey that I wanted to mention. We first started with the question of like how we so which database do we want to use, and we wanted to first go with a similar setup that Google has with its Spanner database, like a strongly consistent database that spans across multiple regions so that you have an always consistent system. But sadly, like CockroachDB changed the license in between. So they will roll these kind of changes with a very long delay, like 2 or 3 years. So that's where we are actually also had now to diverge a little bit. And then we started at our journey, and we first thought about like, how does this API integration look like? So we have now these, we have the modeling, right? But you now have to integrate it. And in most instances, we discovered, okay, not everything can be easily mapped to tuples. That means like, what is actually a user in this context? What is like the relation that we are looking at, and what's the object that we want to access? And so, and I will show this later on. So we thought about, okay, we have the OpenAPI specification, so we can specify how APIs should look like and what are the endpoints. Why not extend it with a method to say, okay, if I access this resource, how is the tuple constructed? So what is the user they're looking for? Is it the token? Is it in the URL, or is it somewhere else? Or is it in the path itself for the object or the relation? And that's one thing. So this dynamic configuration of the tuples. And then we also looked into like, how do we actually set up or configure the database for these schemas? And we have a lot of people that use Terraform. And so we thought, okay, that's cool. Let's create a Terraform provider that allows us to roll the schemas and also do some little bit of the bootstrapping. So if the problem with most applications that you roll out, you have the bootstrapping problem. Like, what is the initial user, right? And mostly this is someone in the database. But if it's not in the database, but it should be actually, it's just an identity, and there should be a role in the authorization system, you need to bootstrap it. So create this initial admin with the global role that you need to see there with a specific user. Yeah, and from there we integrated in some of the open source tools that we have within the Zeiss organization. Nox is one simple secure Terraform backend that uses OpenFGA for the API security. And then we have also another one, Typhoon, which is basically an event bridge that works across on-prem and cloud, and one architecture tool that's called Servicelets. Okay, that was like the initial phase of the idea, and now I will share what we've built. Let me share this. So I will start sharing my desktop. think that's the one. So, okay. I hope now everybody can see my screen. Okay, so I will start with what we did for the OpenAPI side. So there's a tool. I would then demo the how you can use it. But first, I will explain a little bit what we did there. So what we did is an OpenAPI extension, which is actually only like a property in the OpenAPI schema. And there you can specify for an endpoint where the user part of the tuple comes from, saying, okay, it's in the namespace user. You should take the OIDC, so the OpenID token, take the identity that's in there and the audience, make this the user. So build this part of the tuple. What is the relationship? Okay, the relationship is very fixed. So someone should have the admin role or the writer role or the editor role. And then what's actually the object that we're accessing? So specifying a namespace, for example, for system, like system-wide object or capabilities. And then where should you get this? For example, from a URL parameter. And this URL parameter is, for example, the team. So it takes the team and then factors in everything from there to build the tuple. This will be compiled into Go code. In this example, with the fiber auth, it will generate some Go code. So you cannot basically infiltrate this. So it's fixed code that is generated, and then you can embed it into your middleware. Yeah, and this is actually implemented in this Nox. I'll call it like backend. So in the API, and it's not that so fancy itself. I can then show the schema. In the API for this, you see these references. Let me see here. So you can see here, for example, if you want to create a new team, you do a post, then we have the addition, like you take the user OIDC token, you have to have the relationship admin, you have to have the access to the object. And then let me first start. This we have in all of our projects that use OpenFGA, by the way. We have this small Docker Compose that spins all of this up locally. So let's see. Oops. Taking the browser. Wait. Oh, I see. That's the problem with code spaces. It always remaps the if you have multiple of one of them, it's remapping the port. Oh, shit. Let's see. Yeah, it's not working because it's a different port. Okay, like demo. You have to believe me. This is working. I may have to actually let me close these code spaces for a second so that I can get this on the right port. I just wanted to show in the playground. It's not. That's the demo problem. Try to reload. I'm really sorry. We can skip to another demo of the Terraform provider first. I would try the. Yeah, the problem with all of our projects actually have code spaces, and sometimes it mixes up when you use code spaces the mapping of the local ports, because we have also local firewall behind it, and sometimes just creates a mess with the port mapping. Yeah, but okay, I will switch to the other demo first. Okay.
It seems Jace had a question.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead, Jace.
Yeah, I was just wanting to make sure like I understood correctly what's happening. So you have OpenAPI schema that when you add in this particular configuration, it will
Yeah.
generate code that will then build the check call that will then be
Yes.
made to FGA to
Yes.
determine if you're authorized to take this
Yes.
action on the API.
Yes. I can
Okay.
also I can also switch back just a second. Yeah, so to explain a little bit, also a little bit more, Fiber is this Go middleware where you build where you can build applications with. It's very flexible, highly flexible, and because it's Go, it's getting compiled, so you need to have something at compile time. And what we do here is basically we have some small packages that have this authentication logic in there. So, for example, to extract OIDC tokens, so you can specify. So there's a logic in there to extract information from the OIDC token in order to figure out the user, and then it's fetching the keys, configuration, all of these from what you need from OIDC, and then it provides an authentication function, and there you can basically factor everything in, and then it will try to authenticate you with this function. And this is all compiled into one binary. So we're not using a gateway in a sense, but we're using middleware for our application that does all of this at one step, basically.
Very cool. Thank you.
So yeah, I will go through it. Hopefully this, let's start with the more easier example that's not screwing up. So yeah, we thought about like what is the way how we can configure this easily, and I saw one of the people in the community actually built a Kubernetes operator, which is really cool because it also does this declaratively, but we wanted to use Terraform. So what you can do with this Terraform provider, and this is basically a little bit of the explanation here. You can specify the provider, which is the OpenFGA API endpoint. You can define basically your store, so you can name a store. You can put in the schema. You can take a file, but this demo is all embedded into one. And then you can also have as a resource a tuple. And this is basically a user relation document. And then you can associate it, of course, to the store with the current ID of the store and the current model of the store. And there's an example in it that does all of this. So what you can see here is and I hope now this works with the ports so that we can see this. Let's see. So spinning this up. Just a second.
You're really building the excitement here.
Yeah, no. I'm now switching. I hope you can see it. So basically, this is an empty an empty installment of OpenFGA. Okay, so now we have to. So let me switch this down. Just a second. So close this kind of stuff here. So, okay. So we are setting this up locally because locally testing of Terraform providers is a bit tedious. So that is doing all of the local setup, basically compiling. So just an explanation, like with what Terraform is, it uses a gRPC connection between the plugin and the and the Terraform binary or the Terraform program. So this is how you can plug into Terraform, and these kind of providers are actually these kind of plugins, or this way of Go plugin. So we can now go into our examples, and then we can do our usual Terraform plan. So it will try to tell us what it's planning to do. So what it's planning to do is it will try to create a store. It will try to create a model. It will try to add a tuple with document demo and a user and a reader. And let's apply this. Yes, I want to have this. And so wait a second. I think that's a different installment. Oh, oh, that's not working today. I think that's on a different port. That's a different installment of the API.
If not, make sure you can see the store list there. Maybe you need to increase the size of the window or something like that.
Yeah, let's see. I will go here. No, I think
Somewhere.
I think that's a different
In a store.
Yeah, the problem is that there's a different
Can you try creating a new store there? And just do whatever name.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a different word. It's a different store.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm really sorry about
No
this.
problem. I have a question about this.
Yes.
So, but I assume what you did is you just created the model and
Yes. I mean,
and
you can
everything
see
in
it where
the
you have
yeah,
these
yes,
defaults. Yeah.
perfect. And I have a question. So today, in the way OpenFGA works, is that each time you create a store, you get a store ID, right? Each time you create a model, you get a model ID. You need to get those IDs, and those are the ones you would use later in your applications to configure the application, right? We are discussing if we wanted to also offer you a way to have a unique name for the store and for the model. Right? That, for example, you could use the commit hash for identifying a model, and then you can use that as the way to configure your application. Instead of using model ID, you can use an ID that you already know. That could be, for example, the commit hash of the model. My question is, if you think that that's going to help in any way for this use case of the Terraform provider, if it's going to be simpler or more difficult, if you could provide a name for the store, a unique name for the store and the model, and use those as a way to identify them.
By the way, it's working on now. Change
okay, awesome.
the ports. You see that it's actually created the tuple and it created the schema. So
awesome.
That's working. I don't so specifically with Terraform, it doesn't make it easier.
Okay.
Because resources have to have a unique identifier, even though what you name in there, what the properties that you have of your providers or of the resources, it needs a unique identifier to also to keep track of basically of versions of these resources over time, because it will not change anything if the name stays the same. It just checks and then sees, oh, the name is the same, so the resource has not changed. So you have to provide them actually with a new identifier. So I'm not sure if this in this case would really help. Actually,
let's say now you want to deploy a new model, right? A new version of the model. And so how would you do that with the Terraform provider?
So what the Terraform provider is actually doing is you go the model. So there is a method for update. So this is what you have to implement. So what it's trying to do is now create a new model, take the new ID and put it into the new into the resource, and from there it will try to keep track of for with the versions basically.
Okay, but let's say if you go to the Terraform file again, and now you change the model to something different, and you do a plan, right? So what it should give you, should tell you now I want to change the model, right? Because like the model is changed. So when I apply this Terraform provider, I should create a new version of the model. Correct? That's the way it should work, right?
Yeah.
And how good you know that the model changed is because you're going to compare the model, it's the string of the model. You're going to have a version of the model you're going to specify somewhere here.
Yeah, I mean, for Terraform, it actually checks the spec before. It tries to check if the spec. So it really compares resources. So basically, in this case, the model is its resource. It compares if there's something different, and if there's something different, it tries to create a new resource or new reference to this resource.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So let's see even if this destroy works. Let's see if it now works. So we want to destroy everything, and now it should be gone. Let's see. I think this is also helpful in the cases where you want to test things, basically setting up your infrastructure. So everything's gone now. So it's empty again. Everything destroyed. So also for me personally, if I want to set up a test environment, I usually use this as a way to set up my test environment locally, so that I can have different configurations and then just do a shoot, destroy everything again, and recreate it if I need. Yeah. So yeah. And yeah, this is basically it for this part. So I thought Terraform would be a good way to do it. I think it will not scale that good because, like, you can imagine if you want to have all tuples in there, it's not scalable as a solution. But for the bootstrapping problem that we have with projects, I think for the bootstrapping problem, it's a really good thing actually.
You can still have store in the model without the tuples, basically.
Yes, of course you can. But sometimes we need to pull in the reference to the resources from something else, basically. So if I have different resources where I want to pull this in, I cannot easily put it into the model itself. You know what I mean? Like if I, for example, have a reference to an Entra ID or an Entra ID app that we set up for demo where we fetch some users before. To have this as a separate resource where you can put in these user relationships and documents, it's a little bit easier to make this kind of testing scenarios where the user is not random, or not random, but it's not only a testing user, but a real user that you have to fetch from a different resource.
One question is, because we have the model ID as part of the tuple, if we change the model, what happens? Do we delete the tuples and re-add them?
No, it will try. So the implementation logic is that it will actually try to see if that's in there and then make a comparison if it's needed or not.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah. It tries to be smart, but it's not that smart. So if you go beyond like doing some complexer setups, it's not working that great. But yeah, that's a limitation of Terraform. All right. So that's what we are working on, basically.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Sebastian.
Super cool. Thank you. Thank you for demoing this. As always, the demo gods were not with us, but most of us are a bunch of engineers, so we know that demos are built to be failing whenever we show them to people. So it was still really nice to see. It's nice to see that the community is taking the tools that we're building and just building on top of those and making them work for their own use cases. So yep, really, really cool.
Yeah, happy to do. And I mean, I imagine that some of this will eventually end up with you as an inspiration, especially I think I can give one comment. we wanted to apply this with Tyke. I don't know if you noticed, we have in the middleware Tyke, where we use a lot of for our API management, and they support OpenAPI. But they have a quirk in their API where you can actually not have plugins with the extensions on the OpenAPI. But if we would have this, we could actually implement it right away in the API gateway and not in the middleware. So just saying, there is some improvement in the surrounding environment.
Thank you for that tip. I think we'll definitely keep that in mind. Okay. Thanks for the demo, Sebastian. As I said, it was really nice to see what you're working on, but we have something else lined up, which is a demo of the batch check API. Justin, are you in this call?
I am. Thanks, Sam.
Take it away.
Hello, everyone. I am Justin. I'm on the FGA team, relatively new on the team. I've been here about a little over 2 months now, so still learning a lot, like I think we all are. And I have a quick demo to show, which is mostly just Postman. So I'll talk for a minute before I show Postman because it's not that exciting. I'm demoing what we're calling a batch check API. So if you have used our SDKs in their current state, you'll see that there's a batch check method in there. But what it actually does is it kind of spins up a concurrency pool and fires off your batch as a series of requests that all happen simultaneously. So from a developer perspective, it kind of looks like they were batched. But from the perspective of FGA, it's just receiving a whole bunch of check requests very fast, which is not a huge deal if you're not doing too many. But once you start to do dozens or hundreds of checks, then network latency becomes a real problem. So now we have an actual batch API where you can send us a list of checks in a single request, and we will resolve them all and send them all back to you. And now I will share. So it's an important note. This is live in FGA as of last week. It is not yet in the SDKs. So if you wanted to use it today, you would have to develop against the API directly, but the SDK work is currently being done. So it should be in the SDKs in the near future. And now I will share. You should be able to see Postman. Yes, okay, cool. So this should look mostly familiar. This is me, I have FGA running locally. This is just regular old Postman. I have a list of checks in here. They should look very similar to existing check requests. We're sending object relation user. This correlation ID is something new and unique to batch check. Basically, when we receive all these checks, we run them concurrently. So we need to know which result is associated to which actual check. So we have this ID that we are using. If you run batch check via one of our APIs, you won't have to know about the correlation ID. We will just do it under the hood for you and return you a list of results. But if you want to send us a request or send FGA a request, you have to provide an ID for them. And so I will invoke this. I have it running. And then you'll see in the responses, the response is just a list. So these are the IDs that were sent along with each check. So you see that the Justin check was allowed. This check for one of Charles's relations is invalid because I specifically plugged in something called fake relation, which is invalid. And then there are multiple checks that were run for Anne. Important one note, I guess, on correlation ID. The IDs I'm using for dev are very bad unique identifiers. In our docs, we're recommending that people use either a UUID or a ULID or something, but you can use any string that you want. So for development purposes, it's pretty nice to just be able to put in a human readable string, but I wouldn't actually use something like this. And is there anything else important of note? Yes. 250 million check requests a day. This could help. This could indeed help. Yes, we're hoping that it does. Tyler, do you have anything else that you want to add specific to batch or what's coming? Cool.
No, just that the SDK support for it should just kind of work behind the scenes for it. So shouldn't have to do many changes to just take advantage of the batch check endpoint. And then I was going to try to put a link to the documentation on it.
This looks really cool. One question I have is why the mismatch between the format on the request of having a list with correlation ID and then on the result we have a map?
That is a good question. We debated this for a pretty long time internally. The mostly for ease of use on the server side, I think. If you use the SDK, it'll come back as a list, which I think is what we're deciding on right now. So you'll put a list into batch check, you'll get a list out of batch check, unless you are one of the folks who is interacting directly with the API, in which case you'll get a map. But developers on the SDK shouldn't notice that there is a map being returned.
Yeah. We discussed that, and so the issues the payload we will need to return if you send a lot of batch checks is going to be pretty big if we return all the tuples you already sent, right? That is the contract that we have in the SDK today, because we don't need to send the tuples back. We just get check and we have them in the client already, right? So we're going to do the same thing on the client, but you're going to use the correlation ID to create that response ourselves. And so the way you are going to be able to use this is you call batch check, and then you filter for the ones that are true, and that's the ones that you get true, right? So you get the tuples that you had access to as part of the result of batch check, and that wouldn't change. But we believe this were kind of the implementation. They're going to be more performant on the server, and we also debated should we kind of return it in the same order or not that you send them. And again, the same reason was it's going to be faster if we can do it in parallel, like whatever the comes first, we just return it, right? So the idea of that is just maximize server performance, which is at the end of the day what is most important, and make it easy to use in the SDK. That's what they are for. Make sense?
And I see a question in the chat from Andrew. Yes, the correlation ID is specifically to map back to the source tuple, and it's for an individual request, they have to be unique. We don't really care what they are as long as they're unique. If you send a duplicate, it'll get kicked out and you'll get an error message saying we received a duplicate correlation ID.
Will the SDK generate the correlation IDs for you? Like if you make the batch check? Okay.
So yeah, you shouldn't see them if you're using the SDK.
Sweet.
All right. Thank you, Justin, for this demo. I think batch check
Can
is
I ask a
definitely...
question? I just put it in the chat. I can
Go
ask.
ahead.
Yeah. So in the batch checks, does it consider the relationship between the tuples? For example, in our use case, we send around 300 requests per batch check, and all of those tuples are referring to the same object. So will it kind of optimize for the checks? For example, just pull out one tuple from the database, and then you can resolve basically all the checks. That's for our use case. Will it do that?
Not yet. So the implementation right now is going to do a check. In this scenario where all the permissions are for one object, we have this list relations thing on the SDK that ends up calling batch check, right? The idea is that we're going to have at some moment, or that's the idea at least, list relations endpoint in the backend, where given we're going to know it's all for the same user and the same object, we're going to have another algorithm that is faster to resolve that one, right? So here it will be faster than what you have today, but it's going to be faster once we do this further optimization.
Okay, so right now we are just sitting on round trips, essentially, from the old.
We are saving round trips, yes. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
We also have like a local cache in the node that you're hitting, right? So in this case, we're going to probably we're going to cache a lot of things because we're going to get into the same tuples, right? So it might be faster than also because of that reason, and in addition of the round trips.
Okay, thank you.
We've got another question in the chat by Alan. If we're planning to also provide some batch endpoints for writes.
So I guess just reinterpretation of the question. The question is, will we offer non-transactional writes on the server? Correct me if I'm interpreting it right, Alan.
Yeah, that's correct. Basically, I noticed that at least in the SDK, we're in a .NET world over here, but basically the only way you can get multiples up there at one time is if you send them individually. It seemed like you disable transactions and you can batch them up, but effectively it's, it tells you how many spins up, how many processes it's going to send across at one time. Whereas really, a lot of times what we're doing is we may be sending up a bunch of stuff, and currently one of the problems that we have is like if a relationship already exists, like perhaps we have multiple microservices that are writing the same information, and so we have a relationship that already exists, we get an error back, well, that would fail the whole transaction. So what we want to do is we don't really care about that it's from an idempotent perspective, the system as state is where it needs to be. But we can't send them all at once because it'll fail the transaction. So basically it has to spin up all of them individually.
Yeah. So we are thinking of ways to address the problem of like you get an error, there's a duplicated tuple, and that will give you the way to send them in a single transactional batch, right? And I will let you know which ones failed, and we'll figure out still the API, right? How it's going to work. But the idea is that, yeah, we are aware that this idea that the whole thing fails and you don't know why is not very helpful, and we want to address that part first.
All right. We have 1 minute left. If there's no questions, I'll super quickly go over the rest of the slides. We had one more demo by Tyler, which we're going to keep for next month because we're out of time. If you're interested in what's coming next or what's in progress, here's an overview, but you'll be able to see this on our GitHub roadmap as well. So I won't go into detail. And lastly, a little bit of community news. First of all, we participated with Hacktoberfest, and we saw a lot of participation during last month on our GitHub. So thank you for everybody that did contribute to any of our OpenFGA repositories. It was a big success, and it also meant that we were 5th in the list of the CNCF projects in terms of commits, which is really cool because if you look at it, we're amongst very big names in there. So that was awesome to see. I think the impact of Hacktoberfest was definitely visible for OpenFGA. But because October is finished doesn't mean that we're not looking for contributions anymore. If you're willing, or if you're building something and you think that it belongs in the OpenFGA GitHub organization, or you just want to fix something, add something, help us out, feel free to contribute to any of the repos that we have available. We have a new LinkedIn, or we are on LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn company. So if you want to stay up to date with all of the things that are happening with OpenFGA, feel free to join us at linkedin.com/company/OpenFGA. And we'll post some updates on there regularly as well. Lastly, OpenFGA is currently, Andres is currently at KubeCon North America. So if you're at KubeCon and want to talk OpenFGA, send him a message on Slack. And you'll be able to meet him. And we're also going to be presenting at Cloud Day Milan. So if you're in the Milan area and you want to attend Cloud Day, one of our developer advocates, Andrea Girelli, is also going to be part of that conference. Lastly, if you are an adopter and you haven't added yourself to our adopters.md file, we'd love to see your name in that file, just so we can keep track of who is using OpenFGA and also keep track of all the amazing things that you're doing with OpenFGA. That was it. It was really fast, but we're out of time. So I'd like to thank you all for joining. Thanks, Sebastian and Justin, for the demos. And I hope to see you all next month. Thank you.